Hello everyone! I am not sure how I feel about this current video that I'm about to make because we are going to be discussing the books that I read in January. So this is my January wrap-up. However, I don't know if I succeeded or if I failed. I will leave it up to you in the comments. So to start this month off, I read my literal favorite book of the year already. And I'm like, great, we're got that out of the way. Everything else is trash from here. I read A Treason of Thorns by Laura E. Weymouth. I already have talked about this a little bit, but essentially Laura E. Weymouth speaks to my heart and speaks to my state of being and to my state of mind and my mental health, and I feel like she gets me a lot, and her writing is what I wish I could communicate. So for me, this book was super important for me to read, and I'm glad I read it first. I will say, if you are going to approach any of Laura's books, you need to go to her website and you need to read the content warnings for The Light Between Worlds and A Treason of Thorns before you even approach these books, because they deal with heavy mental health topics and they deal with topics that might not be safe for you to read if you are not in a safe frame of mind. So that being said, this book was the story of... Okay, I have to also say this. Laura's books are not plot driven at all. They are very character driven, and the world around them plays a little bit of a role in who they are and how they act, but it's mostly about the character. So if you're in this to read a book that has, rising action and a climax and then, falling action and it fits into a neat little plot map, don't, because you will be very disappointed. This is a book about a girl who is figuring herself out, who is figuring out her place in the world, who has been told her whole life, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it, this is who you are and who you're expected to be, and how she comes to terms with maybe that's not who she is, and maybe she isn't who everyone has thought that she could be, and dealing with the loss of that person along with the loss of a family member and becoming this new person and trying to feel okay with that. It is a story of discovery and a story of loss. So, for me, it was beautiful. The plot of this book is a girl who lives in what is essentially a sentient magic house, and this particular house is responsible for the upkeep, management, and well-being of the area surrounding it. Therefore, the caretaker of the house, or the main person that lives in the house, has to use and influence the magic that comes from the house to create positive change around it. So the house begins to kind of fall apart and fall into disrepair, and Violet, the main character, has to come to terms with the fact that maybe her father is not taking, as much care, or something's going wrong. And in the end, it comes down to Violet being the one that has to kind of figure things out. And I don't want to spoil it too much for anybody that does want to read it, but I will say that it is not a book about the magic house. It is not a book about the magic. So don't come into it thinking that it's this cool magic system. That's not what it's about. It's really about Violet and her development as a girl to a teenager to a young adult. That is what this is. But I loved it. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. I love it. I love her world. I love how she talks about mental health, and I love how she describes things. I love flowery prose, and this was full of it. So this one was a 5-star read for me. The second book that I read this month was The Bone Witch by Rin Chupeco, This is the first book in a trilogy following the main character. I believe it's pronounced T, but I kept saying it Taya in my head, but they kept referring to her name as a drink, so I think her literal name is T. But I also find it very interesting that the book is called Bone Witch, because in this particular world, Bone Witch is kind of a derogatory term, and it is used as a term to denote that you are very other and you are very unwanted. You are needed, but you are not necessarily wanted. So the training and the world building and the magic system is developed in this first book. The characters are starting to feel a little bit fleshed out, but this is the story of a girl who discovers that she is not like everyone else around her, where they might not have any innate magical powers, or if they do have magical powers, it's for healing. She is what is called a dark Asha, or a bone witch, and what that means is she can raise the dead and put them back to bed. It is very rare, this particular power. So once T kind of realizes that she is one of these dark Asha, she is whisked off to a city to be trained on how to become a fully fledged Asha. And the training follows the format of what a Maiko or a Geisha or a Geiko would follow. It is very, very similar to the training that one of these women would go through. They have to learn to dance, play an instrument, they have to go to parties where they are essentially the entertainment, while also learning like politics and medicinal herb remedies, add in the magic training and the combat, and it is a very intricate little world that is being built up. The purpose of a bone witch is to quell these giant, beastly, dangerous monsters of the world by slaying them in the only temporary way that these particular things, they are called Deva, can be slain. So it's a temporary death. They keep coming back. So these dark Asha have to continuously be trained. And this book is pretty much the training of T. It doesn't really go into much else. There's a budding love story happening. There is a little bit of intrigue and a little bit of scary political assassination kind of things happening. But mostly it's a book about a girl trying to become essentially a Maiko or a geisha and the world around it. And it left off on a huge cliffhanger. So I was a little bit pissed off at that. Pretty much right when it was starting to actually finally get somewhere, it ended. So I will say that this was a very slow read for me. It took a lot longer than I thought it would. But overall, I was happy that I read it because now I can read the next one, which I am hoping is insanely wonderful. The next book that I finished this month was Echo North by Joanna Ruth Meyer. And I loved this book so much. I always think that these are Beauty and the Beast retellings, but it is actually a Norwegian fairy tale called East of the Sun, West of the Moon that these books like this are based off of. And I've only ever read one other retelling of that particular fairy tale, and it's East by Edith Pateau. And when I started to figure out that this was also that fairy tale, I was so excited. This book took me a day to read because I loved it. It's so different from East, like so very different. And I loved the twist at the end. I was not expecting the twist at the end. It is very much one of my favorite styles of retelling because I always think like, oh, it's Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast isn't my favorite fairy tale because it feels abrupt. The ending doesn't feel right. This is what I feel like Beauty and the Beast should be. It's not just you break the enchantment and magically there's a prince. No, it is a whole extra, you get like a whole extra chunk of lore and story about why was this enchantment even existing? Like, what on earth happened? How did this come about? And it's so wonderful. It is a beautiful book. I highly recommend this. I rated this 5 stars on Goodreads because I read it in a day and it was wonderful and I loved it. The next book that I finished this month is one that I'm kind of surprised that I did not like very much, and that is Angel Mage by Garth Nix. Garth Nix is one of my favorite authors. I own everything he has written, and I own multiple copies of certain books because I have a signed edition and a first edition, and I have different editions of the books that he has written, and this one did not live up to my expectations at all. This book is a standalone fantasy novel where mages can call upon angels for aid. There are lesser angels that do things like dust, and there are greater angels that do things like part the seas. And depending on which angel you call and for what purpose you call them for, you pay for that favor with some of your lifespan. That premise alone was insanely fascinating to me. And I picked the book up because I thought that was going to be a little bit more heavily talked about, and it was not. So the story is told from 5 perspectives, which for me is a struggle because I already have an issue connecting with one character when they only speak for a few paragraphs. But when it immediately switches perspective to a different character that I care a little bit less about, that becomes a struggle for me to actually keep the narrative in a book. So 5 perspectives was a lot. One of the 5 characters is supposedly a villainous character called Liliath, and the whole book is her essentially trying to bring back what I feel like is a fallen angel or an exiled angel, and she's trying to piece him back together so that they can be together. Like, she loves this angel. So the whole book is based around her having a group of followers that are trying to be rebels and get this angel back together. But there's a blood curse that was formed because of this fallen angel, and so there's this, like, under society that are looked down upon. They're the dirty dregs of society. If you use magic on them, they either become a terrible zombie beast kind of thing, or they just die. So it is weirdly convoluted what her real purpose is, but essentially it feels like she wants to bring this angel back together and bring him back to, like, a presence on Earth because she loves him and she wants to be with him. So there's that. That is her perspective. There are 4 other perspectives that are told through a group of 4 friends. There's a, like, accountant dude who is really boring to read from. There's an artist who was fantastic to read from. I wish the whole book was told from her perspective. There's a soldier girl, and there is a doctor, and he also had a pretty interesting perspective to read from. So these 4 friends are inexplicably drawn together for some reason, and they keep running into each other, and for some reason they feel drawn to each other, but they're not related. It's pretty obvious about, like, 30 pages into each character's, like, arc why they're drawn to each other and what this book is going to really be at the end of it. And the book takes about, let's see, how many pages are in this freaking book? This book is 534 pages long, and I would say that the plot wraps up in the last 30 pages, and the first 500 pages are boring, redundant, annoying to read from certain perspectives, and where the hell is the fucking magic system? Like, I want to read about angels being summoned and people, like, losing their damn lives because they're trying to do some crazy cool magic or something. No. It's interpersonal relationship drama, some political bullshit. There's, like, 2 mentions of, like, lesbianism. The characters that I wish were more developed are kind of cast aside for just because there's like 7,000 characters that talk in this. And the magic system, man, the magic system. Come on. That was such a cool, like, you opened a door for yourself and you didn't take it. You took a weird other alternate path. That this, I feel like if this book was not young adult, it would be more interesting. But because it has to kind of fit into the young adult category, it made it a lot less interesting. So I was really disappointed by it. I think I only rated it 3 stars, and I'm checking Goodreads right now because I don't remember. Yep, 3 stars for this one. And I rated it 3 stars simply because there was some interesting mentions of magic. The plot, while crazy, all over the place, was interesting for a little bit, and I didn't hate this book, but I didn't love this book. And I feel like that's where 2 and 3 stars sits for me. And 2 stars being, ooh, I really didn't like this, and 3 stars being like, meh, I didn't really care either way. Like, I probably wouldn't be mad if I hadn't read this, but yeah, it didn't make an impact on me, and I probably won't read it again, and that's the sad thing. The last book that was on my TBR for January was The Toll by Neil Shusterman. And boy, oh boy, was this the most disappointing thing that I have ever attempted to read. I hated this. And I feel real nervous saying that on camera, but I got 300 pages into this book and nothing was happening. I cannot stand that. Why on earth am I reading 300 pages of garbage, of crap, of nothing happening, and then deciding that I can't read anymore because it looks like for the next 100 or so pages still nothing is gonna happen? This book is not short. This book is 606 pages long. Is that right? Or is it even longer than that? It's longer than that. Good Lord. 625 pages long. And it took me all the way until page 300 of nothing happening. Nothing happening. For me to say, I cannot do this anymore. The main characters don't even show up for like 100 pages. And then once they do show up, they don't fucking matter. It is like they are very Romeo and Juliet in this, but like in the background. And you would think that with all of the political commentary that Neil Shusterman is trying to make in this book, that you wouldn't see certain tropes or certain stupid characterizations being brought to life, but you do. And Goddard, the bad guy, oh my god, he really had a chance to be a really bad dude that you had like real reasons to hate. And then you turn him into a coward and he's a big whiny baby. And it's like, yeah, okay, really? Your villain becomes that wishy-washy? When? Where? And it just felt so disingenuous because it is trying so hard to cater to the current political and social climate instead of just fucking telling the story that he had already been telling for 2 fucking books. It's boring. I had to force myself to read this book. It is so boring. Okay, before I rant about this, just be aware that I might be spouting off nonsense, but it really resonated very poorly with me. So there is a character in this series, or in this last book, that I only read 300 pages, so I don't really know how this was resolved. But Jericho, referred to as Jerry, is a character that comes from a region where all of the children are raised without a gender, and they are forbidden to choose a gender until they reach adulthood. Let me read you this passage because I know somebody's gonna fucking come for me and be like, that's not right. That's not what it says. All children in Madagascar were raised genderless and forbidden to choose a gender until reaching adulthood. Even then, Many didn't choose a single state of being. Some, like Jericho, found fluidity to be their nature. Excuse me? How is that not fucking problematic? Choosing a gender when you reach adulthood? What? Why do you have to choose one at all? And if you are also non-binary or gender fluid, male and female doesn't necessarily mean you. So making it seem like being non-binary or gender fluid means that you have to either be male or female is not cool with me. I do not like that. And the book goes on to have Jericho be either male or female, depending on whether or not Jericho is under the cover of cloud or under the sun. This felt like Neil Shusterman put in a gender fluid, non-binary character to say that he has a gender fluid or non-binary character in his book. Jericho was treated extremely poorly in this book. The Thunderhead at one point possesses them, and it is very wild that this wasn't seen as a terrible thing. The Goodreads reviews for this book are very much, yay, representation! Without thinking of the consequences of how this was written. The book is boring. It's not what I expected from the finale of a trilogy that I have been following with extreme hype. I was so excited to read this, and oh my god, am I glad that I did not finish it, because the rage that I was feeling throughout reading this book was not great. Like, it actually put me into a slump because I was so frustrated and so disappointed and a little bit sad and hurt to feel like a character that could have been really awesome, and it would have been really cool to see some accurate representation, was used as what felt like a token and was abused and was not given like the justice that I feel like this character deserved. So this was not good. And if you loved it, awesome. I'm glad for you. I fucking hated it. So I think I gave this a 2 stars on Goodreads, and I genuinely feel like I should just give it a 1 star. So why don't we go in and, oh no, I didn't give it a rating at all. I didn't feel like it was fair to give it a rating because I DNF'd it and it would show up as one of my finished books. I didn't finish it. It's trash. It was garbage. I fucking hated it. This is the worst way to represent people in the community. It was fucking terrible, and I fucking hated it, so I didn't review it on Goodreads so that it didn't count, because I didn't finish it. So I couldn't count it towards my finished books for the year, so it just, it didn't get a rating. But if I had to give it a rating, it would be a 1 star. Trash. Absolute trash. The end. If you liked it, good. Good for you. I'm glad that you found something that you could like about this book. Because for me, I'm a hypercritical, mean-spirited, I don't know any more negative adjectives to, give myself. I didn't fucking like it. It was bad. So, yeah, I don't know if I can say that I succeeded or if I failed at my January TBR, but I gave it a red hot go and I did my best. So that's all I can really do is give it my best. Especially with how, you know, mental health gets in the way of doing things you love. So that was my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry I got a little bit ranty at the end there, but it needed to be said. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me be an absolute nutcase about the books that I read in January. And if you want to interact with me some more, I have a Twitter account and a Bookstagram, and I post my reviews on Goodreads. I just do star ratings. Every now and then I'll do like an actual review, but what's the fun in that? That's effort.